So hello to you all. It's funny, I don't have anybody's faces there, but I know that you're there. My name is Megan Marcy. I work as the Water Conservation Program Manager for Bernalillo County. And we are co-hosting this workshop with Bernalillo County Open Space. I'm going to have the opportunity later in the training to provide you with a little bit more information about the Water Conservation Program. But on behalf of the Open Space Program, I just wanted to make a plug to encourage you all to visit our open spaces in Bernalillo County. These are some of the most beautiful amenities I feel like that the county has to offer. These are 17 properties that really have a range of different values: agricultural, cultural, historical, ecological. And so if you have the opportunity to get out and visit these properties, please do. You can find out more information at bernco.gov/openspace. Open Space, in conjunction with the Water Conservation Program and other partners, offers a lot of programming. And so I just want to make a plug for some workshops that are coming up later in the summer. We have a couple of workshops in 2 weeks that are exploring the topic of passive water harvesting in greater depth. And so those will be both online and in person at the Gutierrez-Hubble House. And then later in the summer, we have a workshop on the ever popular topic, drip irrigation repair for homeowners. So when I get the opportunity, I will post a flyer for those workshops in the chat and also a link to our Open Space Program event registration page, where you can find more information about the workshops and also register. So with that, I wanted to just give you a little overview of this training. What we're seeking to do with this training, which I hope was conveyed to you all in the workshop description. Doug Pushard, whom I'll introduce here in a minute, is going to provide you an overview of rainwater and graywater systems, rainwater harvesting and graywater systems, from the simple to the complex. So we won't be getting into a lot of depth, but wanting to give you an idea of the sort of range of options that are available for both types of systems, to assist you in deciding how you might take the next step at your own home. I know for me, I started, like so many people, collecting rainwater in buckets, moved to rain barrels that we constructed ourselves, added storage, and then now have been constructing passive rainwater harvesting features. So I think all of us kind of starts at the beginning and progresses through. Doug is, as he'll talk about later in the presentation today, is focused now on building net zero homes. So, just kind of giving you a sense for that range of options. And then what we've done with the training is provided time for your questions, so that after his presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions about how you might apply this at your own home. And to that, logistically, I just wanted to invite you all to put your questions in the chat during Doug's presentation, and I will try to find a good point to interrupt him and interject those questions, especially if they're relevant to what he's talking about at that moment. Then later, after his presentation, we'll open up the floor and we'll talk about it then too, but you're welcome to raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can ask your question directly to Doug. So that's how we'll handle questions. With that, I wanted to mention too, for everybody's knowledge, that I am recording this training. The intent is to post it on our website so that folks that couldn't attend today will have access to the recorded version of the training. So I hope that's okay with everyone, and that is why I am doing it. With that, I'm going to introduce Doug with the hopes that he is here. I think he is by phone. Okay, but let me give you his bio. Doug designs and works with homeowners and local contractors to install small to large residential water management systems. They work closely with homeowners and builders to maximize the water capture while optimizing water efficiency and minimizing overall costs and required ongoing maintenance.
Glad you remembered.
Doug is a lifetime American Rainwater Catchment System Association, or ARCSA member, and accredited professional and ex-board member of ARCSA. He's QUEL, which is Qualified Water efficient landscaper, irrigation, and Graywater certified, and teaches water classes at the Santa Fe Community College. He's a prolific writer, and his articles have appeared in New York Times, Water Efficiency Magazine, Home Power, Taos News, and Water News, among others. He has an upcoming article in Turf Magazine on water reuse. He's also the author of 2 water studies that have been widely published, Rainwater Harvesting Industry Market Size and Trends, and first ever long-term water conservation rebate study. Doug is also co-chair of the Next Generation Water Summit. So with that, I just want to add a personal note. I have had the opportunity to work with Doug on several projects over the last 2 to 3 years, and I just really appreciate what he brings to the table, both as a practitioner and also an educator. And in that regard, he's very generous with sharing his own knowledge and also providing forums for us all to share knowledge through, for example, the Next Generation Water Summit. So thank you, Doug, very much for being here to do this training with us. And I will see if I can bring you in and allow you to start the presentation.
My computer, can you hear me? Okay, my computer, I need to use my phone, Megan.
Yes, I think so.
Which, my phone?
Oh, I'm sorry. So your audio is not coming through very clearly right now. I would suggest using your phone.
Is that better? Oh, hold on.
Yes, it is. If we can get rid of the echo.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, the echo was on my side. Sorry.
Okay. So would you like me to pull up the presentation, Doug?
Yeah, I think it's going to be better that way, Megan, please.
Okay, will do.
And I apologize. We did this presentation on Thursday night, but both we had a little timing issue in that we have the President of the United States here in Santa Fe, or New Mexico, actually, headed down your way. And when an event like that happens, the bandwidth goes away. And so we're having a bandwidth issue. So we'll start off. Graywater, Rainwater, which is right for you. Megan, next slide, please. We are going to talk, as Megan said, about rainwater. We're going to give a quick overview. We're going to talk about graywater. We are also going to talk about blackwater, even though it was not in the title of the session because it's an important water reuse. We'll talk about decision process summary, and then Megan will come back and talk about the programs, what's called rebates here, but what the programs are available to you if you're living in their service area. And then we'll finish up with resources and have time for questions. Okay, New Mexico. We are very, very fortunate in New Mexico. I will repeat that statement. We are probably the best in the country when it comes to reuse regulations. And rainwater, we start with rainwater. Rainwater is legal in the state, and we can use it in all various forms, and we can all use it for various uses. Of course, irrigation is the one that we all think about, but we have thousands and thousands of homes that rely on rainwater as their only source of water. They have no city water, no well water. They only have rainwater. We've got hundreds and hundreds of homes up in Taos, which gets about 7 inches of rain a year for all their house use. So they're indoor, they're toilet flushing, bathing, dishes, as well as using irrigation. So we can use rainwater in all forms and fashions. The roof-reliant landscaping that you see here on the bottom of the slide, that is one of the resources available to us in the state. It's published by the state, the Office of the State Engineer. We'll give you a link to it at the end of the presentation, but it's a valuable resource if you're thinking about doing larger rainwater systems. There are lots of resources, but that's a really good guide, and it's free. Rainwater can be harvested off many surfaces. We think about it typically off the roof, and that's where we will talk mostly today, but it can be harvested off driveways and other hard surfaces and reused. So it is possible. If you're going to use it in the home, will typically require a permit, but the permits are very easy to get throughout the state. If it's commercial, then it would actually require a permit. And we do have many commercial systems. The movie theater down in Albuquerque off the freeway and the Uptown Shopping Center. It uses it for toilet flushing and landscape. So they use, that's a commercial one that is right in Albuquerque. It's a very large system in the parking lot. Next slide. As I mentioned, it can be used for all use. The case study we're going to talk about a little bit later uses it for all indoor water. And the reason why I emphasize that is because of the water quality of rainwater is much greater than the quality of well water throughout most of the state. I have lots of clients where we'll do a well test and we'll do a rainwater test, and they'll always pick rainwater with this no mineral in the rainwater whatsoever. Very little dirt coming off the roof into any of the tanks, so it actually is very clean. It's very easy to do it for toilet flushing if you can. It's a great source of water for toilet flushing, but of course the primary use is irrigation. One of the questions we always get is rainwater safe for plants, and the answer is yes. It is actually a great water source for irrigation, but as I mentioned, it has no nutrients in it whatsoever. So if you're going to water, for example, a tomato plant strictly with rainwater, that tomato plant will actually need fertilizer because there is no fertilizer whatsoever in that water that you're putting into the plant versus the other forms of water we're going to talk about, which actually have nutrients in it. Rainwater can be used on all food crops. Use it for tomatoes here, and with no fertilizer at all, what you get is just spots on the tomatoes because they just don't have enough nutrients. It requires little filtering whatsoever. Even if you bring it into a house, you would have a sediment filter, a 10 micron filter, and then a UV. So it's very easy actually to bring in the house and make potable. Megan? Here's an example of something Megan mentioned. You're going to have a workshop in a couple weeks, passive. I always ask people if they can do passive or think about passive. And the reason why is it's the simplest type of rainwater. Here is an example where in a typical Santa Fe tradition, we have a dirt road that's going downhill, and the house at the end of the lane was getting all the road water runoff, and it was going into that garage door you see in the upper left-hand corner. That we solved by putting a berm in the driveway, a speed bump, if you will, and then this little sunken pond with trees in it. In this pond, there is a drain, and that drain takes the water away from his garage door, actually away from his front door. There's also an overflow you can see right below that, and it takes it and puts it into a corrugated black flexible pipe you see as the next, and that transports it from the front of the house to the back of the house. From there, you can see it going into what we call a perf pipe covered with a sock. It's the same black pipe, but it has holes in it, and it's covered with a sock to keep the roots from growing into that tube. That is laid on top of gravel, and the water comes down, hits that perforated pipe, and goes out of the perforated pipe into that gravel and waters the landscape. You can see the tree below that is totally watered through that passive system. It does have an overflow, so we slope that tube up. And so at the end of the tube, it would go into that overflow basin we see at the very far bottom left. And that basin is where the resulting water would go. That basin is actually surrounded by two large cottonwood trees, so that water actually is used by those cottonwood trees. That basin doesn't have, there's no plastic liner below that basin whatsoever. The water is gone out of that basin within 24 hours. And we try to do that so that we do not have mosquitoes. And that's a great example of a passive system where it is actually augmenting the water. You may do this with an irrigation system and then put plants like fruit trees where you want to give them, or cottonwood trees where you want to give them extra water. Megan? Storage comes in all shapes and sizes if you're going to go for tanks. Upper left-hand corner is the classic old wooden rain barrel. This is what I grew up with, and it was under a downspout with a ladle in it. So we would, when I was a kid, we would drink right out of that rain barrel. I wouldn't advise that anymore, but you then can have all sorts and sizes of rain barrels going. The rain barrel typically is 50 to 55 gallons. The tank in the middle, you see that with the fun design on it, that's about a 10,000 gallon barrel. The rectangular ones we have now available, those will range anywhere from about 500 to 1,000 gallons. That one right there is about 1,000 gallons. The metal tanks are very, very common. They're a little more costly, but we see them in commercial and we see them in rural. Nambe, I have a couple up there. In that area, they're larger tanks. That's like a 20,000 to 30,000 gallon tank there. And then we have people that will do custom tanks, and they can be painted, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner. Typically, when you get into tanks, you're also going to get into pumps. You're going to get into filtration systems. The storage allows you to store the water for future use. We get about a third of our precipitation during the winter months, another 10% during our springtime. So going into our harvest season or growing season, we could have thousands of gallons of water ready for our plants. Typical above ground prices are about $1.25 to $1.50 a gallon. When you go to below ground tanks, you're talking about $1.50 to $2 a gallon. If you're going to go with tanks, you need to look at a mix if you need a large gallonage for what you're trying to do. It's often easier and cheaper if you have a below ground tank, a smaller one, and then you have large above ground. I've got one client that has over 60,000 gallons of above ground storage. They just buy the tanks and add them, and they just harvest the water when we have our big rains, and then they'll store it in those tanks. And those tanks, some of those tanks probably have water in it from 3 or 4 years ago. Not saying that everybody should do that, but it is an option. So there are lots and lots of options when it comes to tank. That is not the case probably 10 years ago, but now they come in every color possible and lots of different sizes. They actually now make one that looks like a fence. And so you can put it up as a fence between a house or a fence against the wall. Megan? So when we're looking at, there's just a few things I want you to be aware of. The bottom right one is the one that concerns me the most, and that's leads in the gutters. Cleaning your gutters, when you start doing rainwater management or graywater or blackwater, you have to be aware that you are now a water manager. You now can add to your resume a whole new skill set that you're going to learn. Cleaning gutters is not going to be one of your favorite activities, but if you're going to harvest water, those gutters need to be cleaned. They need to have a gutter guard or a gutter screen on them to keep the rodents out. The center screen where you have the downspout and the connector, that's your conveyance system. This is obviously going to a underground tank. You can see where the water has come out of the downspout, hit that screen, and is actually washing the water away. So when you're trying to capture water, be aware of trying to connect things like this. They make the square boxes that this downspout could actually fit in. So it would fit right down snugly into the square box and not have this air gap, if you will. Also, water, when it's running fast, is going to jump over things like that round lid. It will hit it and bounce as if it was concrete. The example in the top right, that's a great example where somebody has built their own system. This was in Austin. They've actually bought 50-gallon drums, which are available, and they've hooked them all together to create almost 1,000 gallons. A very, very inexpensive way of doing it. They're all hooked together. The important part of that picture, which is not obvious to a lot of people, is that the connections are at the bottom of the tank. So if we go to the upper left corner, we see the two rain barrels with a hose, and the hose is actually connecting at the top of the tank. That is wrong. And it's wrong for two reasons. One, the first barrel has to fill up. Water will go the path of least resistance. That's a very small hose. You see the downspout coming in is probably a 3-inch downspout, and you're trying to force it through a 3/4-inch hose. It will come up through the downspout first before it goes through that hose. The other thing about the hose, so the hose should be at the bottom of the barrel, and barrels will self-level. And therefore, you only have to have a drain in one of the barrels versus having a drain in both of those barrels. The bottom one right below it, you see a very cost-effective way. They've got 100 gallons of storage right there, right next to the house, and those are hooked correctly with the overflow at the top of that top barrel going into the yard. So again, rainwater systems, we can start simply. The one in the middle, this is something I see quite often, and you'll see the bricks, 4 bricks that this setup is set on. Those rain barrels are 400 pounds each when they're full. If it falls over, it's going to hurt somebody. So typically, if you're going to put it on a platform, you're going to look at a platform that's 4x as large as the barrel you're putting it on. So it needs to be a very large platform so it can be steady. If it tips over, it will be staying on the platform versus falling on the ground. So very, very important. If you're going to try and raise a barrel, very possible to do, you need to plan on the platform being bigger than what you're thinking to give it that pressure you want. By raising it, the platform just has to be a little bit bigger. Next, Megan. So the math behind rainwater systems, very simple. The number is going to be 0.623. That's the amount of gallons you can catch on a square foot of roof. So you're going to multiply that by your roof size. Then you're going to multiply it by your rain that you're able to get. So if we're taking a 12-inch annual normal and a 2,000 square foot roof, we're talking about almost 15,000 gallons. If we're looking at about 7 inches of rain, we're talking about 9,000 gallons. So it's still a good amount of water. That amount of water, if it's 14, that's probably going to last you 2 months of irrigation watering. So that's for a yard without grass. But that water is not going to be all available to you. Some of that water is going to be lost due to inefficiencies in the systems, the type of downspouts you have, type of roof, if you have any guttering that has leaks in it, you're going to lose some of that water. So you should always plan about capturing 90% if you've got a good, that's called a conveyance system to wherever you're going to take the water. Now, I say square footage of roof. It's important to know that that square footage could be a portal. And in fact, greenhouses will sometimes drape plastic between the greenhouses and catch rain off that plastic and channel it to where they want to store that rainwater. So it doesn't have to be your house. It can be a portal, it can be wind shears, it could be plastic to help you capture that water. So it doesn't need to be an expensive dwelling. And in fact, the case study I'm going to show you in a few minutes, almost half the roof space is a portal. So very important that it doesn't have to be the roof, but it has to be some structure that you're going to be able to capture and harvest that water off of. Megan? Pros and cons. Rainwater, its biggest pro is it is very, very clean. As I mentioned early on, that the rainwater, typically when we're doing water tests of rainwater versus well water, rainwater is not even close. There's no minerals in it. You'll typically, off a new roof, depending on the roof type, you may have some of the roofing material that gets into the rainwater, but over time, of course, the roof gets cleaned off. You'll have dust, but that dust is so minuscule compared to the amount of water, it doesn't really leach much into the rainwater. It can be done inexpensively, and that's probably a key point. As I mentioned in some of the examples, I mean, I have clients capturing it off plastic tarps, so does not have to be an expensive proposition. As Megan mentioned, making your own rain barrels. It's a workshop that I've done before, and it's always a fun workshop. You don't have to buy them, but Bernalillo, as Megan will show you, has some great opportunities, so there's no need to make them. So widest use of water, you can use it for anything from irrigation, your garden, all the way up to drinking. So it's an easy, clean source, can be done in existing and new homes. And most importantly, and the one that we don't think about much, is it reduces downstream effect. What I would like to see is zero runoff. And when I go to my clients, that's always what I'm preaching, is zero runoff and 100% water reuse. Runoff is actually a taxing event that we pay for through our property taxes because it's creating literally tens of thousands of millions of dollars of downstream effects that we have to fix. And if we could get to zero runoff, we would eliminate that need. It's very, unfortunately dependent on weather. This time of year is always a dry time for us before our monsoons. We have about 2 months of very little rain, so we have to capture it early in the season, and then hopefully we get our monsoons early in July and then start recapturing it. We are very fortunate that our majority of our rain actually happens during our growing season if we're going to use it for irrigation, and we have a normal year. Roof size, capture size, directly dependent on how much you can capture or harvest is going to be your roof size or what you're going to capture off of. Doesn't have to be expensive, but it is the number one thing. I get calls of people that have 500 or 600 square foot cabins, and I tell them they want to do rainwater harvesting, but they need to put a portal on or some type of screen where they can capture it. Because if they're going to try and depend upon drinking water and they've got 500 square feet, it's going to be tough to make that math work. Megan, next, please. Any questions on rainwater, Megan, you want me to answer before I go to Graywater?
There are no questions right now in the chat, Doug, so I did make a little plug to put them in there to everyone via the chat. So if you all have questions as we go along, please put them in there and we'll definitely get them answered. Thank you.
Yes, and I did say, I didn't say, and I should have, this is your session. So if you have questions, please don't hold them back. Let's take those questions. That way this session is very useful for you. You're taking your Saturday, a valuable Saturday, to learn about water and water reuse. Let's make sure it is worthwhile for your time. I really do mean that. So we're now going to move, if there's no questions on rainwater, we're going to move to Graywater. I said it before, we're very fortunate. We are fortunate in that we, not only is it legal to capture and reuse Graywater, it's actually promoted in most places of the state to capture and reuse Graywater. We have a state guide. This is in the resource section. You'll see, you see it down at the bottom of this slide. It is a great guide put out by the state. It shows you lots of schematics of how you can capture and reuse your Graywater. If you're thinking about Graywater, I'd highly recommend you download this guide or run by one of the state offices. and pick up this guide. It's a great little guide. Bernalillo has some of their, and Megan will talk about this, some own programs in place that promote Graywater. We literally have thousands and thousands of these systems installed. The movie theater down in Albuquerque also has a Graywater. They capture all the faucet water when you go in to wash in the men's and women's restroom there, and they use that on the irrigation outside. It is, we don't have lots of commercial systems yet, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but we have lots and lots of residential systems. Our code was copied after Arizona. I would say Arizona has the best code in the country. We are number 2 after Arizona, but we are far better, where it's almost impossible to install a Graywater system in Colorado, right north of us. Almost impossible. Utah, it's not impossible, it's illegal to install a Graywater system. California, it's legal, but it's almost impossible to get a permit in some parts of California, even though it's legally statewide. So we are very, very fortunate. We can use up to, if the system uses or produces less than 250 gallons a day, getting a variance in Bernalillo or a no permit in most of the state can only be used for subsurface or mulch basin. That's an important distinction between it and rainwater. No fruit crops except for trees. So your fruit trees definitely can use it. And I mentioned that we have great nutrients in Graywater. Megan, next, please.
Doug, we did have a question come in about rainwater. Do you want to fill that out? No, okay.
Sure.
So the question was, what is the easiest, most efficient way to calculate roof square footage for a pitched roof without climbing up with a measuring tape?
You do not calculate pitched roof. If you're looking from an airplane and you're flying over your roof, the pitch doesn't have anything to do with the area. It's the footprint of the house that you want to calculate. So it's not the pitch of the roof, it's the footprint of the house that you're calculating. Of course, you will add to the footprint of the house any eaves that your roof may have. And that's how you calculate. You don't need to get on your roof. It's not adding any more square footage because the rain is actually most of the time coming straight down from the sky. Good question, though. Thank you. Okay. Any other rainwater questions before I move on?
Nothing further at this time.
Okay. So laundry to landscape, and we're going to there is a program in place for Bernalillo, and Megan's going to talk a little bit about this, but this is the simplest way. We talked about rain barrels being the simplest way for rainwater harvesting. A laundry to landscape, often called an L2L system, is the simplest way. You'll see the clothes washer in the bottom left-hand corner, fills with water. The pump of that rainwater washing machine would normally send it to the sewer. In this case, there's a 3-way valve and a diverter valve. It sends it outdoors, and you'll see the pipe go through the wall. Then it goes to underground piping, and it sends it to those basins. And the basins, you'll see by those arrows, are actually in a mulch. So the basins, those pipes are actually underground, and it's covered with mulch. Very, very simple system. And a clothes washer, a new clothes washer, you're still putting out 10 gallons every load. An older clothes washer, so if you've got a clothes washer that's probably 7 to 8 years old, you're putting out up to 30 gallons. So it's a lot of water that can be put out depending on the household and number of times you're using it. And it's very predictable because you're going to have to wash clothes and you wash them, and that water now goes to your yard. It's got lots of good nutrients in it. If you're going to do this, one of the things that often get asked, what about your detergent? You should change, if you're using a solid detergent, which would have salts in it, and that's what makes it solid, to a liquid detergent. And now we're fortunate that even in the big box stores, they sell eco-friendly detergents, and those are ones that have less salts in them, and that's why they're called eco-friendly. But move away from a solid detergent to a liquid detergent, and then if you can, move to an eco-friendly detergent. And that's really the only change you need to make. We sometimes put bleach or chlorine into our clothes washer. You do not need to worry about that because it is diluted to such a great extent, it is not going to be harmful to the plants. But very, very simple system to put in. I highly recommend that if you have your clothes washer on an exterior wall, that you look at doing one of these simple systems. Megan? We are very, very fortunate also that there are now larger systems coming on. So if you're looking at trying to harvest, it used to be not even very long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, the systems would be all custom made. They'd be custom designed and custom made, and they'd be installed either in your, most likely in a house that was being newly built if you're trying to capture all the gray water. In the last 3 or 4 years, we literally have had a dozen new people coming to the market with products like you see here. This is a whole house system. It takes all your gray water, it filters it, cleans it, and actually sends it to a UV to take out some of them have a UV in it to clean it up and clean the bacteria out of it. And then it will have a small pump in it, so it actually sends it out to your irrigation system for use. And it also can send it back into the house for toilet flushing. These are brand new systems. I didn't say this when I was talking about the rainwater, but with Graywater and Rainwater, you'll find if you're going to buy parts, maybe you're going to install a larger rainwater system, or you're going to do a whole house Graywater system like this, all these systems come from Europe. Unfortunately, we in the States are not leaders in this segment of water reuse. Europe and Japan are the leaders when it comes to water reuse. So most of the products, including this one pictured here, are coming from Europe because reuse is a phenomenal, actually is a very common practice in most of Europe. And Megan, you can show your slide on water gallons per day, and I'm assuming you're not going to show it at the end of the presentation. So just to put it into perspective on gallons used, we are currently at 120, around 120 in Bernalillo, or
yeah, right around there, like 126 right now.
So 126, which is a good number. Santa Fe, we're a little under 90 to put it, in perspective. We don't have as much grass here, and that's gallons per day in a household per person. So to put it in perspective, we have much less grass, and we have a lot more drip systems up here in Santa Fe, and that's one of the big differences. And one of the questions we get is, because there's a lot of skepticism that we can continue to go down, I want to put it in perspective. A lot of Europe is in the 70s. And so they have been doing gray water systems and rainwater systems for decades. And unfortunately, these types of systems I'm showing a picture of are brand new to the United States. They do require a permit if you're going to install one of these systems, but they cut down the maintenance and you'll have no smell with them. So a great option if you're going to build a brand new house and you want to utilize gray water as one of your water reuse sources. Look at Megan. Pros and cons versus rainwater. Gray water is predictable. You're going to have a set amount of gray water almost every week throughout the year. So it's a great source of water. I'm going to show you how much shortly. It can be done inexpensively if we're talking about the laundry to landscape system. It is an inexpensive and a weekend project. And there is a class on that we'll talk about. It's a great source of irrigation water. It has great nutrients in it. It does have bacteria, and bacteria is very, very good for your plants. Laundry to landscape system can be put in new or existing homes, a lot of existing homes. When we come to the more complex systems where we're trying to do all gray water, that's going to be hard in an existing home unless you've got a crawl space and a basement. it'll be very difficult in an existing home. Cons, it does have bacteria in it, and it's very active bacteria. So you have to be cautious in using and handling it. That's why it should be used only in subsurface irrigation systems with at least 2 to 4 inches of mulch coverage. So animals aren't digging in it, children aren't digging and touching that water. It's not healthy if you have any open sores. So does have a health risk associated with it. It can smell if not properly maintained. If you smell it, it means that there is something wrong. The mulch, typically it means the outlets are no longer covered with mulch, or the mulch has been taken down to about 1 inch, and it's allowing the air from that bacteria then to come into the air versus being kept underground with that mulch. It cannot be used on food crops. Fruit trees, no problem whatsoever, and anything that has flowers on it, they will love Graywater because it's got nitrogen in it, and flowering plants love nitrogen. Megan, any questions on Graywater before we move on to Blackwater?
We just got one. My washing machine is not on an exterior wall. How much of an obstacle is that to laundry to landscape?
It depends on how accessible it is to an outside wall. I have them where we have piped it across the back of a garage and down a wall, and then go out the outside wall on the garage. So it doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. If it is in the center of the house and there are no outside walls available, it's going to be very, very tough. I do have clients. There are small pumps, and you can use a pump, and they pump it through a hose to the outside. But that's a very manual process. So it's possible. It just depends on how much effort you want. Hopefully, there is an outside wall somewhere near. Okay, Megan. So one of the things I'd like you to think about is Blackwater. We are very fortunate in the state in that we allow rainwater, graywater, and Blackwater. We are the best state in the country when it comes to water reuse. We have the best as far as ordinances and statutes in place. We've got a lot of very professional people in all these different markets that can help you reuse this water. That is not the case in most states around the country. They really look at water reuse as a negative, not as a positive. We have a very active Blackwater reuse. We've got literally thousands and thousands of these systems installed in the state. It is very simple to upgrade an existing septic system to a water reuse system. They're called in the state advanced treatment systems. So if you're going to call the environmental department or call Megan, you'd be asking them about advanced treatment systems. And it's simply turning your septic system, which has a drain field called the leach field, to a subsurface irrigation system. So instead of now sending the water out to a leach field, you are actually going to send it to a subsurface irrigation system. And that irrigation water can be used on your trees. And I highly, highly recommend it if you've got any type of vegetation that's flowering. Again, this is going to be nutrient rich. Trees are the best use of it, but it can be used on all sorts of flowering ornamental plants. It does require a permit and an annual contract. Pretty simple, but we do have hundreds of people around the state that can install these systems. Megan, next, please. So it is simply taking, if you have an existing septic system, it's normally adding another tank, and that tank is now going to become your irrigation holding tank. In the first tank you're going to stick an aerator in it, and normally a bug bag to get started. In that bug bag, all it is chemicals, sugar, if you would, to get the bacteria really growing in the new air that has been introduced, that bacteria is actually a good bacteria. And that bacteria basically breaks down all the solids that into the septic system, and they make the water the color of tea. And normally, if you opened up that second tank and that tank had water in it, you would see it the color of tea, and you would notice it doesn't have an overwhelming odor to it. It will still have some odor. Subsurface irrigation helps you with that issue, but it's not a overwhelming project to install it. In fact, upgrading from a septic system to an advanced treatment system can be simpler and less expensive than trying to go to a whole house Graywater system. You do have to have it installed by somebody that's certified by the state. They have to go through a training program, which is pretty easy. You yourself can go through that training program if you want. It can reduce the size of a leach field if you're doing an addition to a house, for example, and that would require an expansion. If you're adding a bathroom, would require a permit and an expansion of the leach field. By putting in an advanced treatment system, you may not have to expand the leach field, and you get irrigation water. So it actually can be quite a cost-effective approach if you have a septic system and you're going to do an addition to the house. It does require an annual maintenance contract with somebody certified to come by and look at to make sure it's being properly aerated. And they actually do a water test every year. It can cut down the pumping required in your primary tank. So it actually can save you money over time and give you a very predictable, large quantity water source. Again, no food crops, but can put it on trees. Megan. Pros and cons. Black water. As you'll see, a lot of water comes out of a house as black water. In the state, it could dramatically improve our water situation if we could get to gray water, black water, and water reuse. But black water is a great source, especially if you're not on if you're on a well and you're irrigating. That's you could use black water, and that would be a great way of reducing your pumping of that well. It can be done on new or existing homes. Can actually meet the water. We'll show you the math here in a sec. Can meet the water requirements of most houses, your irrigation water requirements. Again, like Graywater, does have a risk, a health risk, so it has to be subsurface, has to be installed by somebody that's certified. That means you've taken a class and taken a test. It's not a hard process, but there is a process the state allows and Bernalillo recognizes. Smell if not properly maintained. And then, of course, it is limited on the type of crops. Megan, please. This gives you an idea. On the next chart, I'm actually going to give you the math, but this gives you an idea of the gallonage. We're talking that if every person did Graywater alone, which is the easy way to go if you could do L to L, but a whole house, you're talking about reducing 7,000 gallons multiplied by, and we could do it on every house in New Mexico. We're talking about tens of millions of gallons we would be saving just by moving to Graywater. So even though we're in a drought, and a drought that is probably one of the most severe that we've had in 1,000 years and may continue for the foreseeable future, we have lots of water and lots of water options, even if we're not getting rain. And in some installations, I'll show you in the case study, it's highly recommended you pick two of these. So you may want to do laundry to landscape and large rain barrels because we still do get precipitation. We got winter snow. We will probably continue to get precipitation. The storms are just going to be larger and less frequently. Megan, next, please. So the math you can see on Graywater, this was a 2,000 square foot home again, but now we're doing the math by bedrooms because that's how the plumbing code does. Math for both Graywater and Blackwater is based on the bedrooms, so not square footage. And there's a lot of reasons why we do it this way. But it's very predictable. So if a household gets sold, the next person may produce more gray water or less gray water, but the state has a model to predict how much should be coming out of each home. So a 3-bedroom home would produce 40 gallons per day. You've got 2 people in the first bedroom, and then 1 person for each additional bedroom. It's a 3-bedroom house, 2-bedroom, yeah, 3-bedroom house, sorry, times 40 times 365, so it's 58,000 gallons. Blackwater is the same calculation, but it's 75 gallons. So you'd see in a Blackwater household, you'd be producing about 110,000 gallons. In Bernalillo, they do the math slightly different. It's 75 gallons for 2 people. So they're doing it by the bedroom, 2 people in the first, and then 75 gallons for each additional bedroom. That's Blackwater. And then you multiply that number by 40% to get the amount of gray water that you would produce. And I have to tell you, these numbers they will give you a high production. If at all possible, see if you can use your water meter or your water bill. If you're in a well, your water meter. If you're in the city, your water meter or your water bill, if you're in the city. And in the winter time, that will give you a good idea of how much water you're using, because you're not going to be watering too much in December. And that gives you a good calculation of how much black water. And then you could multiply that number by 40% to be your gray water number. And that's probably a much more realistic number of how much you would produce and be able to put on your landscape. Okay, next. Any questions on Blackwater before I go through a little case study?
There's nothing in the chat right now, Doug, but if you all have questions, go ahead and then we'll do them after the case study.
Okay, so this is one that just finished. Have clients all over the state. This is one that's in north of Santa Fe. It's a large house, 4,600 square foot. As I mentioned, the portal is on the backside of this house. It's the whole backside of the house almost. It's a huge portal, and it allows us to capture a lot of rain off the portal. It's a 3-bedroom house. It gets around 12 inches of rain in that area. You can see it's got over 200 plants, so it's not desert. This by no means, and it does have some pine trees. The trees that you see in the front, those are a pear, a non-producing pear trees. In the front, they have a colorful blossom in the springtime, but they don't produce any fruit. So it's got lots of grasses, as you can see in the front on the driveway. It's got a wide assortment of plants. The shade that you see, the sun coming through the trees, that is actually some pine trees on the east side of that house to block the neighbor, so you're not seeing the neighbor or the neighbor's not seeing you. So a very, very large house with lots of shrubbery. So this is a great example of what we can do. Next, please. So this one has 12,000 gallons of rainwater. It's a large house. It's got a great roof to catch. They wanted to catch as much as possible, so they put a pond type liner on the roof, so it catches almost all the rain that falls. We may lose a little bit to evaporation depending on the heat, the temperature outside. It goes down gutters. I don't think there's any gutters on the front side of the house we can see. The downspouts are all on the sides and the back of the house, so it all leans to the back side. They're captured. Actually, that's not true. There's one in the front of the house. You see that brown stripe coming down. That is actually a downspout. That is a large downspout, and that's a canale, and that's capturing all the piping. It goes underground and is put into tanks. Then it is piped into the house. That room on the far right with that window is actually the water utility room. All water in the house comes into that room. And their hot water is there, their radiant heat, but also their water filtration system and actually their water mixing and management system. So, and they've got 3 water meters in that house. So at any point in time, I know where the water is going, how much is being used for irrigation, how much is being used being pulled in from the city, and how much is actually coming out of the Graywater tank and going to irrigation. It also has a 3,500 below ground Graywater system that is below ground, so they can capture all year long. So they're capturing all the gray water from that house, and they're using it on irrigation. It's all subsurface irrigation. And that's one of the advantages of these new types of systems. We can put them below ground and capture year-round and store it in a big tank and then use it. So that's a great, great option. We could do it in new houses. It's very hard to put those new package systems in an existing house, but in a new house, if you can plan it in. We also use stormwater. All that driveway actually has road base in it. And when it rains, there is a lot of water that comes down that driveway. And instead of running off the lot, we have actually created basins on the southeast side, and those basins are actually surrounding those pine trees that you see there. So those pine trees are being watered twice, and they're very, very healthy because of it. They're getting the rainwater that's coming off that driveway, as well as they're on the irrigation system. So we did not get to net zero. Next slide, please. We got very, very close, and we were able to show that if we had made a couple changes, it was very possible to take a house this size with 200 plus plants and get it to zero water use. Once the tanks were full and the house was operational, during most periods of time, we would have been able to run the house without any incremental water coming in. The biggest change, this subdivision does not allow black water reuse. If we were able to do a black water treatment system, this house would have, that alone would allowed us to get to net zero water. Some of the other things we could have done without black water was pulling gray water in and doing toilet flushing with gray water versus rainwater. That would have given us more potable water in the house, because toilets are the #1 water user in the house. The second thing was I would have upgraded the Graywater holding tank, because in retrospect, they have a lot of visitors to this house, and therefore are producing a lot more gray water than we had actually. Even though it's based on a 3-bedroom house, they have a lot more visitors, so they're actually producing more gray water in the wintertime than we had modeled it to be. So just doing those things, we could have gotten a house this size to net zero water. And if we're getting houses to net zero water, that means we can build and not worry about our water supply. It's not water that's going to be our problem. Next, please. So when we're looking at rainwater, gray water, and black water, I think you probably know I'm a broken record. You know, rainwater is the best quality. It is fabulous from a water quality perspective. It has no nutrients. So if you're going to use it on your plants and solely irrigation, you will have to apply some fertilizer, because it is going to take that fertilizer out of the soil over time. Unlike black water and gray water, it's really nutrient rich and it's got live bacteria, which is also good for your plants, but a health risk. So you need to make sure that your maintenance is ongoing, and those systems, the black water system especially, that is looked after by a professional, or you've gotten the training to do that. Rainwater, gray water, you have some low-end solutions that literally the county, Megan's going to talk about, and I mean, they are not expensive at all to do. When we look at it from an energy standpoint, rainwater is probably #1. If I had to get you to, most site visits I go to, we end up using 2 water sources. We use acequia water, we use well water, we use every source of water we possibly can to cut down well water or potable water use. That's what the objective is, to cut down the use, because we don't need to be using as much water as we are. Megan, next, please. So the things to remember, didn't talk about this, but you can fix it before you start doing water reuse. There are simple things you can do. You have leaking aerators, or you can replace your aerators. It's going to cut down your water footprint. And doing these things will reduce the cost of any water reuse system. In the energy sector, they basically say if you can spend $1 on conserving energy, you're going to save $10 on your photovoltaic system. And that math, although there's been no study done in the water sector, is probably about the same. So if you were thinking about upgrading, you want to do rainwater catchment, and you want to look at your irrigation system, look at your plants. Do they need to be fixed? Does your irrigation system need to be fixed to make it more efficient? There are classes that you can take. Passive before active. You're going to have passive if you're going to do large tanks, because you're going to have an overflow. 0.623 is the magic number. When you're looking at rainwater catchment, you have the math in the presentation for the other ones. They are really based on the number of bedrooms, but your water bill is going to be your best, or your water meter. We do live in a land of freezing weather, so just be careful if you're going to put in something. Avoid the north side of the house. If burying a tank, digging the hole is the most costly part. Try to put in as big a tank as possible if you're going to bury. Filter, filter, filter. I showed you the screen of the gutter. When it comes to rainwater catchment, when it comes to blackwater, when it comes to graywater, you're going to have to filter the water. You're going to have to keep your filters clean. Over time, change out your landscape if you're going to be using it for irrigation, to make your plants more drought tolerant and climate friendly to the warmer climate we're moving into. And before I almost wrap up, we're just going to talk about one more thing, and that's backflow prevention. Every one of these systems we talked about can actually be connected to another water system. If you're going to do that, it is going to require a permit. This is a picture of a backflow preventer. It allows us to tie city water to a rainwater system, or a city water to a graywater system, or to a blackwater to make up water if those systems, and your blackwater system should never be empty. But if it is, to give it makeup water to allow it to be irrigation, because those may be your primary. So these will require a permit, and they will have to be installed by a plumber. And they provide a measure of health, not for you, but for all your neighbors and the community you live in. Extremely important. Okay, and wrapping up, fix it first. Next, think about where you want to use your water. If it's going to be inside, if it's toilet flushing, you can use graywater or rainwater. If it's going to be the whole house, it's only going to be rainwater. If it's irrigation, you have lots of choices on what you could use. Please start. That's the first message. And if you don't know, just start small. Megan's going to talk about a couple of the options that they offer. There's a lot of ways just to start small. Just start and doing something. Passive, if you can, a great option for rain. Look at your lot when it's raining, see where the water's running off, see if there's any way you can keep that water on your lot. There is maintenance with every one of these systems you pick up, whether it's a rain barrel or an L2L system or a complete drinking water system or a blackwater system. There is maintenance. And we're also fortunate that we have literally lots and lots of professionals that know how to do these systems. And we have some great people that work at Bernalillo that are more than willing to give you their time to help you move forward. And thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Doug. I think I'm going to change the order of the rest of our presentation just slightly here, and launch one of our polls. Before I go into my slides, we have a poll that just asks the question, what is the main source of water for your home? And that's going to give me a good understanding of which among you qualify actually for participation in the Bernalillo County Water Conservation Program versus the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority's water conservation rebates. So let me try to launch that now. And if you all could respond, that would be most appreciated. Hopefully you see that up on your screen. Yes, okay. I'm getting that confirmed by the responses. Okay. Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results with you all. Carmela's saying I use both private well and water authority water. That's fine. You know, people have utility water and irrigation wells. I would maybe put you in the water authority category actually, but we can talk about that further. So let me end the poll and show you all the results. It looks like of the people that responded, we have about 16 in the webinar, but 5 of 9 are on the water authority system, 1 is on another water utility, and 3 are on private wells. So that's really helpful to know. Okay, I'm going to put that away and then continue here with the presentation. So I just have a few slides here to share with you the water conservation incentives that we offer through Bernalillo County. I wanted to clarify for everyone, and if I do a poor job of that and needs to be further clarified, we can talk about it when we do the Q&A. But basically, the city of Albuquerque had the first water conservation program in our region, and that started in the 1990s. And when the water authority was created in the early 2000s, it inherited that program and all of the customers in the city of Albuquerque service area. Subsequent to that, the Bernalillo County Commission in 2006 created our program, and the purpose of that was to extend water conservation benefits to the rest of the county, to the residents outside of the city of Albuquerque. And so we serve private well owners, that's about half of our customer base, and also customers of small water systems, of which we have about 40 in Bernalillo County. And that constitutes about 17,000 customers. That's an estimate. We don't actually know with 100% certainty how many customers we have. But when you think about that in terms of the population of the entire county, it's about 10%. So what I want to clarify is if you aren't one of our customers, you won't be able to participate in our water conservation incentive programs, but the Water Authority has a whole suite of really excellent water conservation rebates. They're a little bit different because they've been designed really for the urbanized area of Albuquerque to apply, you know, really to the types of water uses that you see there. And so if you are interested in their programs, they have more programs than we do actually. And they, by and large, are really focused on outdoor water conservation. You can find out more about their programs at 505outside.com. Okay. Oh, I have a service area map. I forgot that I put that in there. So I just want to show you all that if you look at the dark blue parcels that are depicted on this map outside of the city of Albuquerque boundaries, that's where the properties are sort of concentrated that fall within the Bernalillo County Water Conservation Program service area. So we have quite a few people down in the far South Valley. We have quite a few people up in the Sandia Heights, North Albuquerque Acres area, and then the East Mountains. So very, very different constituencies. We went through the process in the 2019-2020 timeframe of updating our water conservation incentive programs, and we did take quite a bit of public input, when we wanted to make changes to these water conservation incentive programs as part of our 5-year water conservation plan update. And these were the 6 programs that we introduced. We actually had 2 of them, and we just expanded those programs and then added the additional 4. So what we offer today is smart water monitors. For those of you who might not be familiar with this relatively new technology, these are, I'm going to say, essentially like flow meters that measure the water usage in your home, but communicate that water usage data to your smartphone. And they not only measure your whole house water usage, but can actually what they call disaggregate your water usage and really help you understand your water usage by fixture type. So this was a water conservation incentive that was of great interest to the private well owners that are in our service area that otherwise have no other means of measuring their water usage. So we offered those. I think the rest are pretty self-explanatory. High efficiency toilet retrofits. So taking high water use toilets out of service and replacing them with high efficiency toilets, high efficiency washing machines, smart irrigation controllers. And then we have a rainwater harvesting and our laundry to landscape Graywater program. And those are the 2 I'm going to focus on telling you about. So we have actually long had a rainwater harvesting program, but what we did very recently at the beginning of this year actually is expand that program to include larger rain barrels. So you can choose between getting 2 free 55-gallon rain barrels or a subsidized 200-gallon rain barrel or 360-gallon rain barrel. And I just want to note as well that when we did our water conservation plan update, we also committed to, again with public input, looking into the option of incentivizing passive water harvesting features. So that's something that we will be looking at in the future. And then as well, earlier this week, we launched a new laundry to landscape Graywater program. There were lots of people in our service area that were interested in Graywater. And as Doug mentioned, when you have an existing home and all these water conservation incentive programs are targeting existing homeowners and trying to support them with water conservation retrofits. So this is the simplest system that you can do as a retrofit. And for this program, we partnered with the Watershed Management Group located in Tucson, Arizona. Some of you all may know them. They're really a regional leader in rainwater harvesting and graywater. So they have a graywater incentive program that they run for Tucson water customers and have been doing so for a number of years. So we purchased, by and large, their kits and then made a couple of adjustments to them. And then we purchased some of the larger parts locally. So what you see is what you get through the kit. It's entirely free. There are some things that aren't pictured, and those are the PVC and poly tubing. But essentially, it's providing you with all of the indoor and outdoor components of a laundry landscape graywater system. And we can also talk about that in more depth if you're interested in the Q&A. When you get a laundry to landscape graywater kit from us, you also get and are required to take a free laundry to landscape graywater for homeowners class. And Doug actually designed and developed and recorded this class for us. It's based on the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Graywater Certification class. So it's very comprehensive, but what he did was modify that to make it specific for laundry to landscape systems. So as is represented on this slide, it covers an introduction to water conservation in graywater, plants and products that you can use in a laundry to landscape graywater system, how to size your irrigation field. And in the case of a laundry landscape graywater system, it's very simple. We're looking at mulch basins. And then he also walks you through how to do the indoor collection portion of the system, collection plumbing portion of the system, then how to do the portion of the system that's distributing the graywater to the landscape. He covers graywater code and then also talks a bit about the future of graywater systems and provides a tour of a graywater system that I think maybe it's 1 or 2 tours, Doug, that were installed in Santa Fe. So if you participate in the program, you also get a free 30-minute phone or video consultation with a Graywater expert to answer your questions as you actually install your system. So just a little bit of technical support. And then as well, in Bernalillo County, and when I say that, I mean the unincorporated area of Bernalillo County where we have regulatory jurisdiction, we actually permit our wastewater systems. And so you are actually required for a laundry to landscape graywater system to get a wastewater variance. And we are waiving that fee if you participate in the laundry to landscape graywater program. Okay, Doug, so turning it back over to you for resources.
Okay. Well, thank you, Megan. And again, as I pointed out, we've got some excellent people, excellent programs. Albuquerque, for those that are in Albuquerque, do have some really great programs, as well as the ones Megan talked about. The Albuquerque 505 Outside is a great resource. They have some plant guides there that are really well written. That help you sort of choose your plants, reduce that outdoor water use. The Graywater guide that I talked about is a link here, Blackwater guide that I showed. The Rainwater, I actually have a Rainwater site, Harvest H2O, and it has a site analyzer that will give you some of the numbers. The question on can you do Graywater if your laundry machine is not on an outside wall, we do cover that, and that class is all online. So you're not attending the class, you go through it at your own pace. We also created a spreadsheet as part of that laundry landscape, so you don't have to do the math, you just have to answer a few questions, and it actually does all the math, and you then attach that to your variance permit. But the Harvest H2O Rainwater site has a lot of Graywater, Blackwater, and Rainwater. If you want to know more about rainwater, there are two sources. The American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association, ARCSA for short. You can just Google ARCSA and manual, and that's probably the best if you're going to try and do something on your own, manual. The Brad Lancaster out of Tucson has a great manual as well, but this manual, the ARCSA manual, is much more of a how-to. Brad is a little higher level, less detail, but both are very, very good books. If you want to know about Graywater, Laura Allen is probably the expert in the country. She has a Graywater book. She's actually got two, Graywater for a Greener Landscape. She actually was at the last a month ago now, Next Generation Water Summit. She and I were on a panel and we reviewed all the Graywater statutes in the West. And again, New Mexico and Arizona, when it comes to Graywater, are the best. That's it for resources. And I think we're going to now open it up to questions.
Yes, Doug, let's do that. I'm going to do one more poll really quickly.
Okay.
You've been holding the phone to your ear this whole time. I forgot about that.
That's all right.
Let me do one more poll with you all, and it's probably an expected question. We're going to ask you which form of reuse, well, rainwater harvesting, graywater, or blackwater are you interested in? So let's see if I can find that. Where's that second poll? This is testing my Zoom skills. Oh, oh, it's not coming up. Oh, wait, here we go. Here we go. Got it. Here we go. See if this works for you all. Okay, I'm gonna wait just a second. We have more results coming in.
Oh, I'm so excited. This is like election night.
For us, maybe it's that exciting.
I know, we're a little warped, but we know that.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results here. So we have, it's very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, we have, I really like the fact that we have people that are sort of equally interested in rain barrels and cisterns versus passive water harvesting. And you could pick multiples here, Doug, on these questions. It wasn't just one only,
Yeah.
obviously, but also a lot of interest in laundry to landscape Graywater. So wonderful. Thank you for participating. Let me, Doug, ask you a couple of the questions that are in the chat. And then I want to ask you all, let me pin you so that you're front and center. Okay. Then we'll open up the floor. And if any of you all want to just raise your hand, you can also ask questions directly. So I had one question here. Since I live in Albuquerque proper, then I need to contact 505outside.com for Graywater support. Oh, that's probably a question both you and I can try to address. Honestly, the Water Authority isn't providing support for Graywater at this time. So
right.
I wanted to actually, I was thinking about this during the training. I'm interested in potentially offering our online laundry to landscape Graywater class to anybody in Bernalillo County. So if you are interested in taking that class, reach out to me. Again, I put my contact information in the chat. It's very easy to remember, waterconservation@bernco.gov. And we can definitely get you access to that much more detailed class, which will give you all the information you need to do a laundry to landscape Graywater system. You'll just be in the position of needing to buy the parts yourself.
Right.
That's at about a $250 to $300 cost, wouldn't you say, Doug? And
yes.
we can give you that parts list. So at least there you can get some support through us. And we can give that question further thought too.
Well, and I do think Megan is correct. If the class is going to cover all the basics you need, it's going to actually, there's a spreadsheet that we put together to do the math for you, which I highly, highly recommend. Even if you're with Megan's allowing you to take that class, it really, really will help you. It's a walkthrough guide on how to do the system. You would have to buy your own parts. The state in Albuquerque's case, there is not if you're doing less than 250 gallons, there's no permitting there within the city required. So that's the other issue that's a little different between Bernalillo unincorporated and the city of Albuquerque.
Thank you. That is a very important point. Yes. I have one person.
We do cover code. We do cover code in that class, and that's why we cover code on this, because New Mexico is a little different in that Bernalillo does some things, City of Santa Fe does some things, but the rest of it's really covered by the state.
Yes, yes, exactly. Okay, we had another person say, I want a laundry to landscape kit. So that's great. Please contact me and follow up. If you qualify for one, we would love to provide one. Cindy asks, why is it not advisable to place rain barrels on the north side of the house?
Even in Albuquerque, we get freezing weather, and part of the rain barrel that will break is the faucet at the bottom, because that is going to be solid ice, and metal actually will crack way before the plastic. And so if you're keeping water in that rain barrel during the wintertime, it will freeze and break. A lot of times, if you're just opening up the drain and making sure it's not obstructed in any way, it's perfectly fine. But you, again, going back to, if you're going to do any of these systems, you are actually a water manager. Add it to your resume.
Okay. Well, just to follow up on that, Doug, there are some rain barrels that offer more freeze protection than others, correct?
Yeah, metal is the issue. And so if you've got rain barrels that have plastic, believe it or not, plastic actually gives. Metal does not give. So plastic, where you have a plastic faucet or a outlet, it actually will last better. Of course, you can put freeze tape around it. I do have seen installations where people do freeze tape around the bottom of their barrels. I prefer not, but that's what people do. You can do insulation with rain barrels not burning. That's really not a possibility with a rain barrel at all.
Okay. Okay, here's another question. Is ARCSA's rainwater harvesting manual the best resource for me to use to determine the size of rain barrels that I should use based on my roof square footage and the 0.23 factor?
It is, you can go to my website. I actually offer a free site analyzer, and that's also a great place to start. I think I have a tank sizing tool there. And as part of this class, if you want to use that, I can give you a code to use that for free. And that's probably a little bit better resource because there's actually a lot of math involved in all these things. We've given you some simplification, and in the laundry to landscape, we're giving you a spreadsheet to do that math for you. So if you're interested in doing the tank sizing, just drop me a note and I can give you a code to do the tank sizing calculator on my website. That's great, Doug. I'd like to see that. I do know as well that the OSD guide that you referenced, in the roof reliant landscaping, that also has an appendix that's dedicated to how to size a cistern system. Right. So they have a pretty good method in there that's relatively simple. Okay, I think we have addressed all the questions in the chat, and so we're right at 3:29. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? And again, at this point, you can just unmute yourself. Oh, one more just came in. No, it was just a thank you. Okay. Anybody else? How do you find a reliable contractor to install? I'm not sure there's which kind of system they were referencing, but let's just say any one of these systems. So I think the simplest way is just reach out to me and let me know what type of system and where you live, and I can give you a couple sources of where to go to find people. Because we are fortunate that we've got lots of trained people in the state. Although they're not in the phone book, because phone books really don't exist anymore for the most part. Yeah. And Google is the world's largest phone book. Hard to find anything. Yeah, it's exactly true. Okay, any further questions? Just give it one more second here. Well, thank you all for using your Saturday afternoon and sitting with Megan and I, and hopefully this was a session that you found informative and you will use. Please help us save some water. Thank you, Doug. And we will be sending you next week a recording of this training. We're also putting together written responses to the questions that came into the Q&A, both for this session and the one we held on Thursday. And so please look out for that. We'll also have a post-workshop survey in there that we'd really appreciate you filling out. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time. Thank you. Have a great Saturday afternoon. Bye-bye.